a community-led digital archive. Africarchive is a community-led digital archive for African research communication. By enhancing the visibility of African research, we enable discoverability and collaboration opportunities for African scientists on the continent as well as globally. So today we welcome 4 speakers. The first speaker is going to be Lombe Tembo, who is responsible for improving equity of participation in ORCID in currently underrepresented areas, especially the Global South. She's also responsible for growing membership and adoption in currently underrepresented regions, whilst ensuring member satisfaction and value. She has a BA in economics and an MA in development studies. And then our second speaker is going to be Dr. Penninah Musangi, who is the University Librarian and Director at Amref International University. She also serves as the Treasurer, the Governing Board of Kenya Libraries and Information Services Consortium. She has been instrumental in the development and implementation of institutional repositories and open access policies in various universities in Kenya. And then our third speaker is going to be Cecile Coulibaly, who is coordinating the technical activities of the digital library for the higher education and scientific research in Côte d'Ivoire as the Deputy Director in charge of the scientific commissions at the Virtual University of Côte d'Ivoire. And then last but not the least, our final speaker is going to be Owen Ioha, who is the CEO of the ECHO Conduct Research and Education Initiative. He oversees infrastructure development, capacity building, and advocacy with the goal of developing all aspects of research and education network and its community in Nigeria. Thank you all for coming, and now over to you, Lombe.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ibuka. So I'm just going to go right ahead and start presenting. So I'd like to talk about the Global Participation Program as a whole, but I will start by talking about ORCID and what exactly it is. So ORCID is an independent, not-for-profit, open to participation by all. The registry was launched in 2012 and it's guided by our values and founding principles. If you want to read a bit more about that, the slides will be shared, so that will be open to you. Also, it's committed to making fair, open data available via our public API and also the annual public data file. So it ensures transparency by allowing any member to nominate a candidate for the board, and more information on this is available on the website. So ORCID provides 3 main services, and the first one, as Joe mentioned earlier, is the ORCID ID, which is a unique persistent identifier which is free of charge to individual researchers. And then the second one is the ORCID record, and this one is a digital CV or profile which is connected to the ORCID ID, and this can include employment, education, funding, peer review, and other aspects that I will mention a bit later. And then thirdly, the ORCID APIs, and this is a set of application programming interfaces, as well as the services and support of communities of practice, which are then enabling interoperability between an ORCID record and other member organizations. So with an ORCID ID, researchers are uniquely identified and they have their research information accessible. I will share a few slides that will show this. So the ability to disambiguate researchers is critical for trustworthy scholarly record. So we ask, what's in a name? So I think I'm a good example for this. You know how many people have the same or similar name, and names may change through marriage or different circumstances. And regardless of what changes happen to your name, your ORCID ID remains the same. So individuals and organizations can use different alphabets, abbreviations, or naming conventions. As you can see, they're different. These are different languages, and these are different variations of a name. So people use different versions of their names during their career. And an interesting example is this paper. This is a screenshot from an actual paper. And the name Gagandeep Singh, they're two different people by the same name, but because of having ORCID IDs, it's possible to disambiguate and know which researcher is responsible for which paper. So ORCID also solves name variation, but the ID never changes. So there's a part of the ORCID ID or the ORCID record, sorry, that shows different name variation. So this person can be Karim Ben Romdan, but then some articles would show them as KB Romdan or Karim B Romdan, or different variations of the same person's name. But all of these would still be recorded under the ORCID ID. It is also easier to connect researchers, their affiliations and outputs throughout their career. And this is why it's so important for researchers to use identifiers for these affiliations and their outputs. So researchers can easily register for an ORCID ID. And so this would enable you to distinguish yourself and also add your biography to your ORCID record. So, even a brief bio can quickly distinguish you from other researchers who have the same name or the similar name. And I know, especially in Africa, my maiden name is Tembo, but there's so many Tembos. So this is, you can see based on, especially in Africa, I think that it's especially relevant for us. So you start by signing in. You go to orcid.org/sign-in, and you set up to edit. Use the little pencil icon to edit the biography section. Then you go ahead and add your bio, and don't forget to save the changes. So also you can't lose access to your records because you can easily add an additional email to your ORCID record. Some people use the email addresses for their current work, but it's also important to add your personal email in the event that you lose access to one of those email addresses for your whichever institution you're linked with at the time. So to never get locked out, it's a very easy process. You just sign in, and then you edit your email preferences. You add your permanent email. So in this box, you'd be able to type your permanent email in the add another email field and click add. And then a verification email would be sent to that address. That would also allow you to set privacy. So you can be sure that only certain email addresses would have access to the ORCID record. So the ORCID record, going to click that. The ORCID record contains information about the researcher's research life. And I'm glad that Joe was able to send a screenshot of her ORCID profile. And this can contain affiliations, professional activities, funding information, research outputs, research resources, peer reviews, website URLs, and other IDs. And you might remember that on Joe's ORCID record, there was her Scopus ID was there, but for this example, there's the researcher ID, profile system identifier. These are just examples, and additional email addresses there. So this is basically what it would look like, and it's important to keep the magic of interconnected systems and interoperability. And researchers should always be in the center, and this is a big aspect of what ORCID does. And so as you can see, publishers would be able to add research outputs and peer reviews. Discovery systems would be able to add other IDs, outputs, research activities, or even build a search and link wizard, which I'll talk about a bit more later. Funders can add funding entries, and research institutions can add research activities and resources, as well as other affiliations. So this shows all the different ways that systems can be connected. ORCID member organizations add validated information. So basically, when an ORCID member updates an ORCID record, the source of that update is captured for use. So for instance, so when this happens, They provide trust markers that can be used to help in decision making. So it shows where the information is coming from. So as you can see here, the source would be the ORCID integration at the University of Oxford, because they're a member of ORCID. Also here, you can see Nature Publishing Group was the source of this entry in someone's ORCID record. So research organizations can add affiliations, and publishers can add outputs and reviews, and also funders can add funding. So as I mentioned earlier about the search and link wizard, researchers can use this service to claim their research outputs. And so what happens is that ORCID member organizations have built ORCID integrations that can help researchers to discover and connect their activities from within their ORCID records. So a list of wizards is displayed upon login. So if you are inside your ORCID record, you'd be able to click add, and this would show up, search and link here. And at the moment, we have 4 DOI registration agencies that are using the search and link, and that are supporting this feature. And those are Arity, Crossref, DataCite, and the Japan Link Center. And we're hoping for more, especially from Africa moving forward. So a list of wizards is displayed upon login in the relevant section. So this particular this particular section is works. And so this, the relevant, the list of wizards would be displayed there. So at the moment we have funding, works, and hopefully in the future we'll have peer reviews as well. So when this happens, researchers would be prompted to grant access to their ORCID record and then taken to the member's website to select the works to be added. So this provides an extra layer of trust, because not anyone would be able to just add works to your ORCID record. So you'd have to grant them the permission. So it displays the relevant organization as the source of the item. So in this case, for my colleague Estelle, it shows that she used the search and link wizard via Arity, and that's how that works. And this is the pop-up that would show. And it would show all the information there, and you'd be able to either authorize access or deny access. It's all up to you. Also, authenticating would allow researchers to keep control of their data. And so here you have to create or connect your ORCID ID just to make sure that the correct ORCID ID is being connected to the information. So users need to sign in, and this guarantees that their correct ORCID ID is connected to the work. It also shows who is asking. So in this case, it would be the University of Milan, and also which permissions are being given to the organization, to whoever is requesting permission. And also it's very important to note that permissions can be revoked at any time on the record setting, and this is in the control of the individual researcher. So that's all about ORCID, and now I'd like to talk a bit about the Global Participation Program, the GPP. So the Global Participation Program is an initiative that was launched in response to the needs of the community in partnership with our generous partners. And what happens is that we continue to see growing adoption around the world. We have users and individual users in 250 countries around the world, which is every country on the planet, apart from a few that are mentioned here. Also, we have over 9 million yearly active researchers and about 1,339 organizational members, and over 5,000 active integrated member systems. And this map here shows the member organizations in 57 countries. So the green shaded areas represent the ORCID consortia, and the blue shows ORCID members. But these, the gray areas, especially for Africa, are very concerning, because this shows that there are no institutional members and there are no consortia in the gray areas here. So ORCID's Global Participation Program is a two-pronged approach to increase the global participation, especially in the Global South. And so the first part of that is the Membership Equity Program, and the second part being the Global Participation Fund. So a bit more about these two specific programs. So the first one is the Membership Equity Program. And this is this program allows for countries to create consortia, but at discounted fees. So there's a discounted membership fee structure for consortium members if they're trying to create this. And if the members are coming from low-income countries, they would have a discount of 80%. While if they're coming from lower middle income countries, they would have a discount of 50%. So the membership equity program can only have countries coming, members from countries who are either coming from low income countries or lower middle income countries. Also, there's a lower threshold of 3 members for the initial year, as opposed to 5 members, which is the normal number of consortia members. And also this part of the GPP is fully funded by ORCID. The second part of it is the Global Participation Fund. And under this, there are 2 specific programs. So the first one is on the community development and outreach, which is to fund local partners to build communities of practice in the Global South. And all the other speakers on the call are under the community development and outreach. We also have technical integration grants, and these ones are meant to fund development of systems that are likely to drive participation in the Global South. We currently have only one grantee under the technical integration grants. We're hoping for more, and I'll talk a bit more about this. So the GPF is made possible by the generosity of ORCID's founding lenders, but the admin costs are funded by ORCID. So also, just to clarify that under the low-income countries and the lower middle-income countries, these classifications are they're as defined by the World Bank income classifications, and these are updated every year. So I could share a link to this year's classifications. I will share in the chat afterwards. So the structure of the program supports a diversity of grantees to spread the risk and increase the chance of positive outcomes. So we do have 2 grant cycles per year. We're currently having the second cycle of the year, and we have about 5 grants per cycle. And the funding award per grant is between $5,000 and $20,000 US. In terms of other grantee benefits, there is dedicated ORCID staff contact, invitation to participate in the ORCID grantee forum and community, invitations to grant community events, invitation to ORCID virtual and in-person events, as well as inclusion in ORCID's ongoing communications program. And then in terms of the focus and the goals of the fund, these need to align with ORCID's strategic objective to increase global participation. And I spoke a bit about the focus communities, but it's only for countries that are, sorry about that. It's only for organizations that are engaged in research and scholarship in low and lower middle income countries, particularly in the Global South. So this is unfortunately not open to individuals, only organizations. And then in terms of the goals, this is the fund is meant to remedy ORCID participation gaps in the focus community areas by providing grants that would be able to develop ORCID communities of practice, to build understanding and use of ORCID in local context, and also to create and enhance technical integrations that would support these communities. So the 3rd cycle is currently running, and there's a webinar tomorrow to talk about how to apply and any other details that you might need in addition to what I have given. But also more details and registration are on this link, and this will be shared in the slides. Yes, that's all from me. I will stop sharing my screen now, and I will wait for the other questions at the end. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much, Lombe. That was highly informative, and a lot of features that ORCID provides. Penninah, do you want to go next?
Yes, Joe, I can. Let me share my screen.
The floor is yours. Wait, I need to.
kindly confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, you can see.
Yeah, thank you. I was introduced by Ebuka. Thank you so much for that good bio. And I want to take members within 5 to 10 minutes on a presentation about what Kenya we are doing. The project is Tembo has explained. We are one of the beneficiaries of this, the Global Participation Fund ORCID project. And that's what I want to share about. So I'll just talk about the project background, the project activities, and the lessons we have learned so far, and what we can share with the others. So about the project background, I can say that KLISC, I'm presenting on behalf of KLISC, Kenya Libraries and Information Services Consortium. I'm the treasurer in the governing board. And the first round of, or the first cycle of the Global Participation Fund, KLISC was selected to receive that award from ORCID. And our project title was actually Empowering Librarians as ORCID Trainer of Trainers. The duration of the project is actually 1 year. It's coming to an end in December. And KLISC is the implementing organization, as you have heard from Tembo, that the fund, it has to be implemented not by individuals, but by organizations. So in Kenya, it's KLISC which is implementing that project. What activities have we undertaken or the project had included? One was to train librarians to become ORCID trainers of trainers. That was done. Happy to report that after the training, the librarians have formed a community of practice where they share experiences and build on one another on ORCID adoption among their respective institutions. I'm happy to note the high number of the librarians from Kenya who have joined this webinar, and that I can say it's courtesy of this community of practice which was formed. So we are able to share experiences, we are able to share opportunities through that COP. We also developed training materials, what we are calling the do-it-yourself tutorial. And we are sharing these materials for future reference, for self-learning and facilitated trainings. So these materials, we noted that of course, not all members of KLISC participated. So we wanted from this project, we developed the tutorials and we share with the member institutions because KLISC has over 140 members. So these materials are accessible to all members so they can train themselves and they can also use them for training because as we have indicated, the librarians became trainers of trainers. After that, we had a training for directors of research from selected universities, and they were basically being trained on the best practices on ORCID adoption, which was shared. Something which came out is that among the universities which participated, different universities at different levels in terms of ORCID adoption. Some are advanced, even they are members of organizational members of ORCID, and they were really free. They shared with the new members about how to go about it. It was interesting that some directors of research did not have ORCID, they were registered. The expressions in terms of when one could get a CV using ORCID was really good. Then demonstrations were done on how accounts can be updated. We noted that some institutions had insisted that you need to have an ORCID account. So members would register for it, and that is the stop. So the accounts are not updated. So we were able to demonstrate how accounts updates are done. So the reason why we were training these directors of research was to provide support and provide advocacy to the librarians in the various institutions so that we can ensure multiple stakeholder participation as we drive the agenda for ORCID adoption. Our last activity, which we are yet to do, we are planned for November 2023, later this year, is to upgrade a number of institutional repositories to DSpace version 7. because that is the version which will allow us integrate those institutional repositories with ORCID API. And this is one of the things you have heard that Tembo talk about. How can you upscale some of the activities going on? When Ebuka was reading my bio, he talked about having established institutional repositories in various institutions. So I worked on that, in that those institutional repositories, we can upgrade them to DSpace version 7, so that now we are able to integrate them with ORCID API. And that is, we have planned that for later this next month. So what are the expected outcomes of the project in Kenya? As I said, it's a formation of an ORCID community of practice. And this community of practice is going out to advocate for ORCID adoption in Kenya, where the other one is organized ORCID trainings in KLISC member institutions. This has happened and it continues to happen. Actually, it also started from our pre-annual general meeting, when we had so many members participating and we were able to tell our members about ORCID. Another outcome is the multi-stakeholder approach, where we want the librarians to work together with the directors of research to push the agenda of ORCID adoption, and then upgrading of institutional repositories to version 7, as I've explained. What are the lessons learned, which is very interesting? One, as I've said, is that we found that different institutions are at different levels, and we were happy about the way institutions were free to share with their others to build each other. We also realized that this was coming from the participants, that there exists various personal identifiers online. So we were being asked, what is so unique about ORCID? Interesting, we were able to demonstrate even the others, but one key thing which was coming out about ORCID is how it is central. That when, like, for instance, you register for Scopus ID, you don't need to create an account. Provided you have an ORCID ID, you can use it and acquire the Scopus ID. Same case to researcher ID. You log in using your ORCID ID. So meaning the ORCID ID is very central, that it can open doors for you in other identifiers platforms. That one we were able to know. Then the formation of the ORCID, the community of practice, which was it was not there, but now after the formation, we are seeing how they are working. The directors of research are really sharing a lot about what is happening in their various institutions and how to keep the ORCID account up to date. Because, like, faculty researchers are very maybe busy. We were very happy to note about the easier way of how to update. How you can update your account from Google Scholar, your ORCID account from Google Scholar, by just downloading your BibText. You have seen even Tembo has shown us how to search and link the wizards. So with that, it was very easy to learn how you can keep your ORCID ID account up to date, which was actually a challenge with most of the participants. Interesting, in Kenya, it is a requirement that any postgraduate student has to have an ORCID ID as required by our National Council of Science and Technology. Now, it was realized that out of these postgraduate students, librarians do not play any role in terms of helping these students to acquire those IDs. And therefore, we agreed that going forward, we are going to support our postgraduate students in terms of ORCID registration. Something also interesting was supporting our authors in identifying the articles using ORCID. Publishers are requiring that as you submit an article, you provide an ORCID ID, but some may not have, or others, they don't know where to put it. So we agreed that we are going to support them. We are also considering an ORCID consortium for Kenya, and I'm happy to learn about what Tembo has shared. Then something else which was a take-home message was the use of the QR codes as an ORCID, as an identification, as in ORCID, for researcher cards. The way business people, they have business cards. From the Director Researchers Forum, we agreed they are going to have their researcher cards. And their researcher cards will only contain the QR code. So when you are sharing their researcher cards, somebody will just need to scan the QR code and then be able to get what that person has done in the works, the affiliations, and what Tembo has taken us through. So those are the lessons learned, and I wish to stop there. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Penninah. That was very insightful as well. And next up is Owen.
Hello.
Hello. Who's next?
Do you want to go next, Owen?
Yes.
Or Cecile? That's also fine. Okay, Cecile.
Thank you. Let me share my screen, please. Okay. Can you see it?
It's loading, but yes, we'll be able to see in a few seconds.
Can you see my screen, please?
Not yet,
okay.
But it's loading.
Not yet. Okay. Is it now? No?
Not yet.
Let me start again.
Yes, now we can see your screen. You're good.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can access to screen. Okay, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to share our work. I want to start by thanking first ORCID, who give us this opportunity by giving us a grant. Forgive my mistake. I'm doing my best to speak English, please. Our project was for creating and implementing an ORCID consortium in Cote d'Ivoire. Yeah. Before, can I have the next? Yeah. Sorry, I can't have the next. Yeah, okay. My presentation will be based on some key points. What was the situation of scholarly communication access in Cote d'Ivoire and open science activities, because this project is included in our activities for open science, and ORCID project achievement, how it was done, and outlooks. Thank you. You can, in the scholarly communication access was very difficult. It has always been difficult in Cote d'Ivoire. And towards the political crisis, we lost a lot of collections. And in 2012, the government was fully engaged in implementing the higher education reform. It was a bachelor, master, and PhD. And it was very important to give visibility and accessibility to collection, for communication, for scholarly communication. And before, during, and after this political crisis and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, knowledge sharing was and is still a key challenge to support training and research activities in Cote d'Ivoire. So one project was very important and crucial for us. It was the project of the Digital Library for Higher Education and Scientific Research in Cote d'Ivoire, created in 2016. It was a national repository. Why this national repository? To contribute to enhance sustainable access to scholarly communication. The digital library facilitated understanding of open science with some key initiative, projects, and activities. I'm going to show you some of them. The first one was the digital library, as I said before, as a collaborative tool for, and it was an opportunity for the consortium of the Library Consortium for Higher Education in Cote d'Ivoire to enlarge networking and strengthening and development skills. You can see the authorities, the ministry at this time launching the digital library, and you can see the community of librarians in the picture. One of the key activities we developed to raise awareness and sensitize people is the Open Access Week in Cote d'Ivoire. It started since 2018, and it aims to develop partnership, collaboration, and also to networking and capacity buildings. You can see some pictures of some activities. You can see the authorities given the digitalized thesis and dissertation to our Director General or UVCI Director General. UVCI is the university who coordinating the digital library as a national repository in Cote d'Ivoire. And you can see toward these activities to give visibility, traceability, and accessibility to scholarly publishing. We started working on a project of a persistent identifier by an Identity Federation project. This Identity Federation project was very important for us to develop access with end users, community of practice, also in such as researchers, librarians, and so on. And you can see that toward this project, we were able to make networking with and develop partnership with WACREN and with stakeholders in Cote d'Ivoire, such as the NRN in Cote d'Ivoire and universities and so on. So we also have an institutional policy for open science signed in April 2022. And we are working now to develop a national policy for open science. And you can see that we organize also a national symposium on open science with stakeholders and decision makers and so on. We need now to go far by sensitizing researchers also. The grants, ORCID JPF grant was welcome. Why? We need to have persistent identifiers to promote and enhance the visibility and accessibility of researchers, data, and research results. It was very crucial for us in Cote d'Ivoire. And for listeners community, ORCID persistent identifier is assigned to each researcher, which facilitates access to publication and research data, improves the discoverability of scientific content, particularly African, and I can add Francophone, because we are not so visible like English, like the other English countries. For UVCI, the project ORCID aims to contribute to face the challenge of visibility, accessibility, traceability, and research assessment. The ORCID consortium aims to establish a community of practice at the national level to share knowledge to help to accelerate the integration of ORCID into organizational systems. And you can see how it was done. For us, the first element was to have to make sensitization and to share information in our institution. And in the consortium, and to share also and sensitize the librarians and the directors of higher education librarians on the interest of this project we are starting. So we organize a lot of meetings. We organize online meeting, webinars to sensitize first the consortium members, the library consortium members, and also the staff, the researchers in our institution. So in the first workshop, the workshop was to form the team of the project and also to share, to form them, to give them, to develop their skills. And so after this, we were able, by sharing information with the team members, to adapt our second workshop, which was a training for trainers. We trained 40 people, researchers, directors of libraries, and also decision makers. And for us, when we understood that it was very important to expand ORCID use and ORCID skills in Côte d'Ivoire, our training was based on 4 modules. The first one was to explain what is persistent identifier, ORCID, issues and interests, policy and strategies. The second module was based on ORCID consortium, how we can define its objective and mission. And the third one was the practical exercise to create and enrich, for creating and enriching the interface with publication and research references. Why? Because we discovered that researchers have all of them, the majority of them have an ORCID account, but they didn't use it. They didn't use it to give themselves visibility. And the module 4 was to plan how we can create the consortium, the national consortium, and how we can have our roadmap. So we work in this workshop of 3 days. We work towards 4 working groups: awareness and advocacy strategy, policies, capacity building, organization and funding, and roadmap for creating and implementing the ORCID National Consortium in Côte d'Ivoire. You can see some of the participants in this picture around the Director General of the University, the Virtual University in Côte d'Ivoire, who is coordinating all the open science activities, and also with LibSense and WACREN, and also the ORCID project. So, advice or challenge and outlook. For advice, the library consortium should be engaged in projects of persistent identifiers, ORCID, for visibility of researchers and data site for attribution of DOE, to enhance the repositories use, accessibility and visibility, and research institution. We link this in all our global activities for open science, and the next project we will be implementing is DOEIs. We also the second point is creating and implementing ORCID Consortium is a great platform for library consortium members to strengthen librarian skills first and enhance collaboration with researchers communities. Sometimes there is a gap between librarians and researchers. With this project, and the first activities we achieved, we saw that researchers as able to see one of the importance of librarians in their institutions. We also, the project also aims to advocate for open access and open science policies, to strengthen also research assessment capacities in academic and research administration. It is easy when all our researchers will have an ORCID and account, and using this ORCID account to make the outputs visible and to make the activities also very visible online. The outlooks. The first outlook for us is to continue our sensitization and advocacy activities from September to December. We are continuing advocacy. Yeah, now the trainers we have in each institution is also making sensitization and advocacy. Second one is launch the hybrid cohort training. It will be, we were planning it in October, but our open access week will be in November. And we will launch the cohort training. What this mean? The cohort training is for each institution, we will organize a training on ORCID, like in the same way we organize for trainers of trainer, but it will be hybrid, online and physically. And the third action will be to launch the consortium ORCID in 2024. After this, you can see that the project will be implementation is a continuity for 2024. And for us, we have a great opportunity also to continue to this project toward one of the projects for open science, which will start in November also, October and November, for open science based on renewable energies and climate change. And our institution agree to give the first support by sharing its infrastructure, support for the membership fees payment, in order to push to the other institution to engage themselves to make our consortium, ORCID consortium in Cote d'Ivoire, very dynamic. And we hope that everything is going well for us, and we are continuing our advocacy. Yeah, thank you very much. That is all for Cote d'Ivoire achievement on the ORCID project with the grant we got by the JPF fund. Okay, thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you so much for sharing all these insights from Cote d'Ivoire. And now we have Owen Yoha to share from EcoConnect how your activities are going in Nigeria for the implementation of the ORCID grant. Welcome, Owen.
Let me stop sharing.
So if you stop sharing, I'll try and share my screen. And can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. I'd like to thank Joe and the team for basically putting this webinar together and all the work they're doing with these series of webinars that are very enlightening to us on different aspects of utilization of infrastructure to promote scholarly communications. And of course, I'd like to thank ORCID as well. EcoConnect is an NREN in Nigeria, and we're also one of the beneficiaries of the Global Participation Fund from ORCID. Now, I work for EcoConnect, and unlike the two previous speakers, I'm not really an academic. I'm more of a service provider for NRENs, National Research and Education Networks. So the remit of NRENs is to be able to provide infrastructure that facilitates and promotes better research and education practice. And in recent years, there's been a drive for the promotion of open science and open access, and to increase the visibility of scholarly and research outputs in Africa, because there's a perception that research outputs and scholarly outputs from the continent are very low. But a lot of that is down to the fact that there is a lot of research that is being done and being produced, but they're not visible in the global ecosystem because of low adoption of the various infrastructure and technologies like persistent identifiers that bring that visibility to the global community. And of course, even from an individual basis, for researchers themselves to be visible as well, they need to also adopt these identifiers. And ORCID is one of the key persistent identifiers that not only promotes the visibility of researchers, as Lombe said in her presentation at the beginning, it also caters for disambiguation. So researchers, you know who the researcher actually is. And if researchers have mobility, that they're moving from one institution or organization to another, their ORCID record and their works will follow them wherever they are. So it's very key that for researchers, they actually have an ORCID ID. And of course, from the presentations we've already heard, there are tight integrations between ORCID's infrastructure with other infrastructure and persistent identifiers. So the more that we adopt ORCIDs, the more visibility for institutions, for researchers, for works in the global research and education space. So as I said, EcoConnect, we're an NREN provider. Typically, NRENs deal with matters of connectivity and campus networks. But beyond that, EcoConnect tries to focus on providing what we call above the network services. And so obviously beyond the core networking infrastructure and bandwidth, we try to look at providing services that bring more value in terms of ability to collaborate and improve education practice. So we're the national operator for EduRoam. That EduRoam ensures Wi-Fi roaming, allows researcher and student mobility. And we're the operators of what we call the Nigerian Identity Federation, or eduid.ng. Now, Cecile sort of alluded to federated identity in her presentation, and federated identity or academic identity is known generically as EduID. So this is infrastructure and an identity that actually allows students and researchers and people in the academic community to be able to access platforms and services from service providers in a trusted and secure manner. And that infrastructure can also envelope other identifiers and metadata like ORCIDs as well. So when we're promoting the uptake of EduID, we can also in tandem promote the adoption of ORCID. So that's very important to us in ECHO Connect. I also act as the co-chair of one of the working groups in LibSense. I think you've heard LibSense a number of times in the earlier presentations. So LibSense is kind of a community of practitioners who are librarians and researchers and NREN service providers like myself. We come together in this forum to see how we can collaborate and ensure that as NRENs, we can deliver the necessary infrastructure that researchers and librarians require to build or improve their own research and education practice. In Nigeria, we kind of have a community-governed open science cloud that we support. And in this cloud, we have some platforms and infrastructure that can be used, repositories, shared repository services, hosting services for repositories, EduRoam and academic identity infrastructure that higher education institutions in Nigeria can actually adopt as part of their infrastructure and practice. And of course, we've become a paid infrastructure provider for Nigeria. And in fact, from the 1st of November, ECHO Connect will officially be the lead organization for the data sites DOI Consortium in Nigeria. So we're very excited about that. Right. As I said, ECHO Connect, we are beneficiary of the ORCID Global Participation Fund. And the general goals of ORCID adoption in Nigeria, which are in line with what we've told ORCID we have as our goals, is to really, increase the adoption of ORCID in our higher education institutions in Nigeria. Nigeria has nearly 200 universities and over 150 polytechnics. So there is a huge number of higher education institutions and many other research institutions in the country. However, the adoption of ORCIDs has been very low considering the size of the country. So we see this as a huge opportunity. The country is also quite large. So the challenges of actually getting advocacy, working in campuses and promoting ORCID adoption is very challenging, but we're actually utilizing the fund we've got to actually get to the campuses to try to develop these open science communities and thereby increase ORCID adoption. So the goals have really been very similar to the ones that Penninah and Cecile have talked about. Train key personnel within universities who can act as trainers in terms of how they can acquire and utilize ORCIDs among other PIDs, and also to talk to governments and the main education fund in Nigeria, which is called TED Fund. They're the kind of funding agency for higher education in Nigeria. And it's also to kind of have meetings that educate the governments and some of the bodies like NUC, which is the umbrella body for universities, and there are other umbrella bodies for polytechnics and colleges of education. So we want to try to educate these organizations about the importance and utilization of PIDs and ORCIDs and how that should actually be embedded in national policy for the promotion of open science and open access. Now, unlike some of the presentations I've heard, like in Kenya, that there does seem to be a national policy for the implementation of ORCID and maybe some other PIDs and open science policies. In Nigeria, we do not currently have any national overarching open science policy to do this. So what we've been doing is really trying to do the advocacy for open science and open access at different levels within the cadre of research and education community to try to promote PID adoption in general and ORCID adoption in particular as part of promoting open access and open science practice. So one of the ultimate goals as well is to actually have an ORCID consortium, so that will actually help to promote and enhance our communities as well. So some of our expected output as a result of the fund is to have institutional support for ORCID in at least 6 universities.
Owen, I think you accidentally muted. We can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. When did we... Right, so some of our expected outputs is to have institutional support for ORCID in at least 6 universities by the end of Q1 next year. I think we will definitely overachieve on that target. And at the same time as well, we're targeting the end of Q1 of 2024 to establish an ORCID consortium comprising of the National Funding Agency for Higher Education, that's TED Fund, ourselves as ECHO Connect and other institutions by the end of Q1 of 2024. I'm not so sure if we're going to meet that deadline at the moment, but that's the intended output. And the other thing is we want to align ORCID, there's complementarity between ORCID and EduID adoption in the research and education community. As I said earlier, EduID is very important for accessing a plethora of services, but that infrastructure has the ability to envelope other PIDs, such as ORCIDs, within that infrastructure as well. So we're having a kind of multiple-pronged approach to the adoption of ORCIDs, whereby we're asking institutions that if you're adopting EduID infrastructure, then you may as well imbibe ORCID into that as well, because EduID can actually house an ORCID ID. And then basically try to make PIDs or persistent identifiers key open science infrastructure beyond the grant period as dictated by ORCID. So these are kind of our expected outputs. Our activities, I'm going to sort of talk through some of the activities. Our project schedule for the year was kind of, we're kind of behind schedule. This is primarily because earlier in the year, Nigeria had elections, and during the elections, all higher education institutions were asked to close down. So all universities and polytechnics and research institutes were closed for about 4 or 5 weeks from February to March. And so that has actually impacted on the academic calendars of those institutions. And then for us to also be able to schedule activities as well was also affected. So we're kind of sort of 2 months behind our intended schedules, which is why while the project fund itself is scheduled to end by December of this year, we're seeing our activity still spilling over into February, March in order to catch up. Anyway, we have started to engage in some of our key activities in the second quarter, towards the end of the second quarter of the year. We had a PID workshop with ONU. ONU is actually the library consortium of Nigerian University Librarians. So ONU stands for Association of University Librarians of Nigerian Universities. And in that workshop, we actually spoke to the librarians. These are the head librarians of all the universities. We met them in Abuja and had a workshop talking about PIDs, more from an overview and strategic perspective. And we actually got to learn that many of our librarians, their knowledge of PIDs and ORCIDs is relatively low. And so there was an agreement that we would hold another workshop with all the librarians in November to do a very much hands-on kind of ORCID clinic to actually get these librarians kind of familiar with ORCIDs. They tended to think it was something very difficult to acquire. Many of them didn't understand that actually registering for an ORCID ID is a fairly relatively simple process. But what we wanted to make sure we could do is get the librarians themselves confident about how they can acquire these ORCID IDs and put in all their various career and academic information into their ORCID record, so that they could also in turn actually advocate for their librarians and researchers in their institutions to do likewise. So I would look at that May meeting as being a sensitization workshop, and then we're actually subsequently having another workshop in November with all the head librarians of Nigerian universities. Just about less than a month ago, we actually had a meeting as well with the Association of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities. So we were able to get about 25 vice chancellors attended this meeting, and we tried to explain to these vice chancellors the business case for the promotion of open science, open access, and PID adoption. And what we were able to explain to the vice chancellors was that open science practice, even though yes, it is open and open sometimes infers free, but open science practice does come at some price, and that vice chancellors need to be able to have budgets put aside for the promotion of open science and open access adoption in their universities. It was a very engaging discussion, and out of this meeting, we actually have a communique where these 25 vice chancellors have agreed that they would sort of come together as a kind of early adopters, so to speak, of the recommendations for PID adoption and open science practice. And we have a communique and an agreement where these 25 institutions have in principle agreed that they will look for budgets to promote the adoption of PIDs, encourage the adoption of ORCIDs in their institutions, and also become members of any necessary consortia that are required to promote the adoption of open science. So in principle, these institutions from these 25 universities are agreeing to commit to DOI Consortium, ORCID Consortium, and something we refer to as a S-Plan Consortium, all in the goal of promoting open science and open access. So these were the outcomes. This was, we have a communique that was put out to this effect, and an expression of agreements, an expression of interest agreements was signed by all of these vice chancellors to that effect. So we're hoping in this last quarter, we're going to follow up with that. We've got a kind of little roadmap, 6-month roadmap of what we want these vice chancellors to do between now and the end of March to fulfill this. So we're quite excited about that. In September as well, there was a LibSense Open Science Symposium in Abuja, Nigeria. As I said earlier, I'm part of LibSense. In fact, everybody here really is actually part of LibSense, even if you realize it or not. So there was a 2-day symposium, and there were a few sessions that talked about PIDs, including DOIs, ARCs, and ORCID. Now, this month, in fact, next week, we are in Benin, University of Benin. We're going to be running an ORCID workshop for postgraduates, postdoctorates, librarians, and some other key academic persons. I'm not quite sure of the exact numbers at the moment, but we're looking at about 60 participants being involved in that workshop next week. And the following week, we're running a similar workshop in another university in the southern part of Nigeria. And we're trying to plan a date to run a paid workshop for our funding agency and other government regulatory organizations. We're just trying to get the date fixed for November. And I think by next week, we'll know the exact dates. And of course, another key activity we're looking at is our users conference. EcoConnect has a users conference every year in the third week, usually in the third week of January. For the last few years, these meetings have been virtual because of COVID, but the next users conference is going to be our first physical conference since COVID. And part of that conference, apart from having an ORCID session in the conference, we want to run what we're calling an ORCID clinic throughout the conference, where people can just come to a desk and inquire about ORCIDs and how to actually get one. And there'll be somebody there who will just take anyone who's interested through the process of acquiring an ORCID ID. So this is just a map of Nigeria, just to give you a kind of indication of what we're doing. So, like I said, we're having the ORCID workshops starting this month in 2 universities, University of Benin and the Federal University of Technology, Owerri. And these are in the southern part of the country. Normally, in order to be able to get to the northern part of the country, it's a flight of about 90 minutes. So that shows you how big and vast the country is. But between November and December, we're hoping to be able to run our other ORCID workshops in some of these designated universities before the holiday season begins in December. So the lessons learned so far, well, we're still learning as we kind of go along, but what we are realizing, at least from a Nigerian perspective, is that we need to structure our dissemination in a hierarchical manner, because we found that even when we engage directly with librarians about adoption of ORCIDs, they may be enthusiastic about it, but they always seem to refer to the fact that in order to have wider adoption and policy implementation, we need to get the buy-in of management or vice chancellors. So we always heard that that needs to happen. So we've actually looked at, okay, apart from actually meeting the practitioners themselves, the librarians, the researchers, the lecturers, we need to actually do advocacy and education of management so that they understand the importance and the business of ORCID, how it can enhance the institution's reputation and visibility and opportunities. You know, so like I said, when we had the engagement with the vice chancellors, we came at that slant, and it was very enlightening for them that they could see that, oh, in terms of getting visibility for their institutions, the ability to adopt and utilize these persistent identifiers, have their researchers and academics use ORCID IDs, actually improves the visibility and potential opportunity that these vice chancellors are seeking. So we've learned that we need to really hit the vice chancellors and the policy makers at the government level to have the impact that we're kind of looking for. So we're kind of seeing that hierarchy as vice chancellors, then the librarians, early career researchers, academic staff, and students. So we see that hierarchy of the higher up that hierarchy we can get to, the greater the impact. We also have learned as well that, at least for Nigerian librarians, many of them are still, you know, how do I say this without sounding too, sounding not offensive? Many of our librarians in Nigeria are still kind of doing outdated library practice, and they've not fully realized that with digital transformation, the roles of librarians have changed to become custodians of information or custodians of their institution's assets. And if they start to understand how their roles have evolved, then they would have a greater appreciation for the need to use ORCID IDs among their staff and among the community in their universities. And again, better articulation of fair compliance and the benefit of ORCID for career researchers is something we realize is a lesson we need to do, an advocacy we need to put across to many of our researchers, particularly now our early career researchers who are becoming postdoctorates, postgraduates, who need to understand that to engage in the global research and education ecosystem and open science, they should be adopting these ORCID IDs and ensuring that the infrastructure they utilize is using appropriate paid infrastructure. And then one key lesson we've also learned is that it would appear that physical training workshops still seem to be more effective than online workshops. EcoConnect, obviously, with the ability to use platforms like Zoom, it's a very powerful tool because of the reach we can get. But we're still finding that when we do physical workshops, the engagement seems to be a whole lot more and a whole lot more impactful than online. So that's been an interesting lesson that we've learned, and we're still learning as we come into the final phases of the project fund for ORCID. But obviously, we want to continue to promote ORCID and kids in general beyond the lifetime of the project. So I think that's really just a brief from the Nigerian perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen. This was fantastic and very informative also. A lot of information shared by all of you. I would like to take the opportunity, now that we are all still in the room together, to ask if there's questions that you might have. Feel free to unmute and just ask along for any of us here. And we did have some conversation in the chat about, because some of us are already convinced that ORCID is a great feature and service to utilize for the reasons mentioned, to make information sharing about the scholarly achievements seamless between the various stakeholders, like also Lombe explained in great detail to us. And now for those who are sitting on positions like librarians and research managers, how can we ensure that there's capacity financially and time-wise to share that information with the users who are, or the target audience, to actually use ORCID and to implement it institutionally? This is also what all of us work towards, to have an institutional subscription with ORCID. There's some financials involved in that, so that's another opportunity to, or challenge actually for some institutions. But the consortium approach that we're targeting here through this program is meant to, and again was pointed out by Lombe, is meant to reduce the cost in providing the service for institutions to make use of. But for individuals, just to make that clear, for individual researchers and scholars that produce scholarly content, ORCID is a free service, and it has a lot of benefits that can cut across various other scholarly services that are also useful for the purpose of research dissemination and discoverability of, in particular, African research, as we will learn more of and have already heard of in this webinar series. So, okay, but to answer that question, or the question was answered in the chat, you also find links to the Global Participation Program by ORCID and the fund and the application site. So if you are working at an institution, reach out to your colleagues and the people in charge to apply for that fund, like we did at the time for the first grant cycle. And yeah, Lombe, please, do you want to add anything?
Well, nothing really. I think you covered it really well. And also, in case people have any more questions on how exactly to apply, there's a webinar tomorrow, and Joe shared one of the links. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And for Owen, Cecile, and Penninah, what do you see? We've heard from each of you. We've heard different particular challenges, but also suggestions and advice on how to go about. There's various aspects to consider and people and positions to consider when it comes to incentivize the adoption of ORCID to the individual researchers, and also to engage discussions at an institutional level. If you summarize that from your presentation, if you would have to point out one strategy and one approach that worked really well so far in one particular use case that comes to mind, could you share that again with us, just to get some traction, Owen?
Well, I don't know if it's a use case per se, but in many Nigerian universities, and I'd say many, but I know there's some Nigerians in the audience, so they may have comments. But in a lot of universities, for researchers, in terms of their careers, it is a publish or perish kind of mantra, that in order for them to gain promotion and advance their careers, they need to ensure that they are publishing papers in high impact journals or platforms, and that basically is part of the criteria on which they are assessed for promotions. And they're really being left totally to their own devices to be able to do that. So they get very little institutional support to do that, but they are expected to be able to find a way of doing that. And in the engagements we're having now with management and vice chancellors, they're actually now starting to appreciate that mantra needs to change, and that they need to be a whole lot more supportive of their researchers and librarians, and that they should actually be helping financially or and encouraging them, so that their own objectives of higher visibility of their scholarly outputs and research outputs and the institution rises. So it was quite strange that many people didn't fully understand that, but the message is now starting to get across that this needs to be the way to go forward, and more embracing of open access and open science.
Yeah, I think that's an important point you're raising, because the misconception about the importance of the journal impact factor is cross-cutting around the world, unfortunately, and very persistent in itself, not as an identifier, but as a measure for quality or reach. And it's actually not true. So I think what we can also help to show, and Mark Gallinghouse is here with us from the Lens. We have a session with them in early December, to provide proof of that you can actually get the reach for the visibility of the research output through open science scholarly infrastructure, and through tools and services that make use of persistent identifiers like ORCID, like DOIs, like and ROR, also the Research Organization Registry, which we'll come to hear about from. Penninah, what would you like to add to this? And what's the experience from Kenya?
The experience from Kenya and what has come out from the discussions we have had, one strategy which is mainly used is what participants were terming as carrot and stick strategy, whereby on one hand that the researchers are being shown the importance of use of PIDs, so that they can enhance their own visibility and discoverability. But on the other part of the management, they are bringing in the issue of a stick, that for promotion, for any support for any researcher to get a support from the university, they need to have these PIDs. So it becomes like it's on one side they are being pushed, but on the other side they are being shown the benefits of adoption of ORCID. So that is one strategy which is working in Kenya, which was shared by various institutions that they have adopted.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also adoption of individuals is relatively high compared to other countries, because there's been a top-down incentivization at the organization or institutional level. Thank you so much. And Cecile.
Yeah, thank you very much. For us in Cote d'Ivoire, we launched our roadmap, and we are working now to expand ORCID use in each of the public universities. And we think that challenge for us is how we can achieve the engagement of each decision maker. And I think that with the training of trainers we made in July, we have now focal points, and we need to go through to work with this focal point during our core trainings in order to continue advocacy. Like I said, advocacy is very important for us. When we met some researchers, and we show them individually the interest to know how to use the ORCID. So a majority of them have an ORCID, and sometimes they think that they don't need this workshop. And when we continue explaining how ORCID can change the visibility and enhance the credibility of the research, they are able now to understand and go through the ORCID account to add the publication and fill the other part of the ORCID account. We think that we need to go ahead. We need to go ahead, and librarians need to be more engaged. It is first for me a work for librarians. Researchers also can be engaged if they want to train the others, because during our trainers workshop, we give them opportunity to go to train their communities. And now with cohort, we will be able to see the results on the result of this individual training and community training. We think that it is very important for us to continue with project. And in 2024, we will be implementing our consortium really. All the activities we are leading now is to prepare to launch this consortium in 2024. And for us, it is okay. We are running to this consortium and become member of ORCID in 2024. Thank you. I don't know. There is a lot of challenge, but we trust in our capacity to make sensitization and workshop to come up with these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So I think as the academic landscape is changing, we're in the middle of a transition towards openness, towards transparency, towards open scholarly infrastructure. It's a mix currently, and it's also okay, and it's gonna stay a mix, I think, also from private entities providing certain services and non-profits and for-profits. Each have their role to play, and we hear from representatives from either what's the word, section or society levels. But it can be really confusing. So what I think we can also achieve, and are already underway in achieving with these programs, is to provide or to develop educational materials, like each of us are doing, to compare and then break the rather complex information down so it's easier to digest for our audiences, and to reach as many academic representatives and stakeholders as possible by joining activities or joint activities like this ones, by sharing best practices and approaches, and continuously working and revising the educational materials. So from the webinar series also that we're presenting here, we will share the recordings, as was mentioned in the chat. We'll also extract the key information from each presentation into a blog post, and link to the various services and accomplishments by our speakers and the respective institutions they represent. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to share your experience and adoption, and any question you might have from how persistent identifiers are being adopted in your country, in your institution, or if you have any last question you might want to get across while we're here? Feel free to speak up now. Otherwise, you can, of course, reach any of us by email, through LinkedIn. We've shared the ORCID profiles, where you can also get in touch through the contact details that were mentioned by any of us. We're all in public positions and some sorts, so you can find contact details for all of the speakers, and of course reach out to us at info@africarchive.org to get access to any of our speakers. Ebuka, I'm handing over to you for the final statements, and thank you also from my end for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Joe. I want to thank everyone for making it to this webinar session today. It's indeed a delight that you made yourselves available for this wonderful session. And also I want to thank our great speakers for speaking and giving us some useful information for this session. All right, like Joe said, the recording for this session will be made available on our website at africarchive.org. And also you can get the full details and register for this ongoing webinar series on africarchive.org/webinars. So the links will be made available in the chat. Thank you all for coming. And Joe, any other last words?
No. Any of our speakers? We want to have some last comment? Cecile? Or Oren, Penninah? Thank you so
Nothing
much.
to add. Just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you for joining.